Hey writers, Megan Barnhart here, coming at you live from the Write with Megan Facebook page. Today I'm going to be talking about tips for how you can stop constantly editing and instead finish writing. So join me for that, and let me hear from you. What does that look like in your world when you're constantly editing, or why is that a problem? Because I hear this from a lot of writers. I'm going to get us shared in the Write with Megan Facebook group. I invite you to join us over there if you aren't there already. It's a place to meet other writers. There's community writing tips and prompts, and a chance to promote what you're working on, whether you're working on writing books or writing for your business. So come on over and join us in Write with Megan. So what's the problem with constantly editing? Well, a big problem is you don't get to finish what you are trying to write, right? You keep going back and editing instead of getting through. And what that can look like is maybe never finishing a chapter. You start a chapter, but you never get all the way through. Or maybe it looks like when you sit down to write, you actually shrink your word count. Has that ever happened to you? Super frustrating. You're like, I'm going to go and get some writing done, and you know your word count before you start. You get to the end of your writing time, and you actually have fewer words than you had when you started. Super frustrating. Or maybe your constant editing looks like you have a really polished opening and nothing else. So let me know. Those are some of the things I notice when I get stuck in constant editing. Those are what I hear from my writing coaching clients. What does it look like for you when you find yourself constantly editing instead of writing? Hey, Lori. Okay, hey, Wayne. Awesome, good to see you guys. If you're here watching live or watching the replay, say hello, let me know you're here, and let me know what does it look like for you when you are editing, when you really want to be writing. I'd love to hear it. And I always get a little bit of a lag, so if you're commenting and I'm not responding directly, it's not because I don't love you, it's just because I haven't seen your comment yet. I'm gonna look at comments and write with Megan too in our group. So the tip I want to give you today is something that will not only keep you from constantly editing, it will actually help you with every part of writing. Hey, Anne. The tip I want to give you is to use the right part of your writing brain, and I'm going to explain what that means. You have a lot of different parts of your writing brain. I anthropomorphize them because that is how I learn and remember things. I make everything alive. So I've come up with different personalities for the parts of our writing brains. And each one of these has a unique skill, and they're all necessary for writing. But when we use them at the wrong times, it's really hard. When we use, they're like tools, right? So when you use the right tool at the right time, things go smoothly. When you try to hammer a nail into the wall using a wrench, it's nothing but frustration. Doesn't mean a wrench is useless, it just means it's useless for hammering a nail into the wall. So if you are using the right part of your writing brain, you're going to have a lot more success. And we'll get down to what that looks like for stopping this constant editing. The other thing I need you to know is that you have all these different parts of your writing brain, and switching among them actually takes energy. Again, going back to tools, like every time I have to put down the hammer and pick up the wrench or pick up the saw, I'm using a little bit more energy. And the best gift I can give myself is to do all my hammering at once, all my sawing at once, all my tightening with the wrench at once. You can tell I'm not very good with tools. I almost did all my wrenching at once, okay? Each time I switch, I'm using a little bit more energy. So far, does that make sense? I haven't yet told you what part of your writing brain to use, so don't worry if you're like, I don't know what that is. But does that make sense that you have these different parts, and when you use the right one, things work well, and when you switch among them, you actually take more energy? Give me an emoji, let me know, does that make sense? Oh, and I'm seeing people commenting about what it looks like for their constant editing. So I'm going to read some of those comments. Wayne says, I find it annoying when I'm constantly editing. I go back and I feel it needs something. I think that's an experience a lot of people have. You go back, you read what you have, you feel like it needs something, and so you start editing. Let me know if you have that same feeling that Wayne has, where I just go back and need something. Hey, Carrie. Yes, okay, totally. All right, awesome. So a lot of people are feeling that. So what can we do with that, right? Here I am telling you that you want to only use one part of your writing brain, that trying to use the wrong tool at the wrong time won't be effective, that switching among those different tools won't be effective. But, you know, you're like, hey, when I go back and read stuff, how do I stop myself from editing? Basically, you agree, you like commit to using the drafting parts of your brain and putting the other parts of your writing brain into hibernation and not waking them up. The parts of your writing brain that are going to help you the most when you're drafting are, one, your inner 5-year-old, and two, your writing ant. That's ant like A-N-T. Okay, so your inner 5-year-old is the part of your writing brain that is just full of creativity and completely lacking fear of the judgment of others. Your inner 5-year-old loves to jump in muddy puddles and play and experiment and make potions by mixing random things together, and is very joyful and exuberant. When you're able to draft using your inner 5-year-old, it probably feels very inspiring and you feel very free, okay? So staying in that space is really helpful for drafting. But your inner 5-year-old isn't always accessible. And that's just because we don't always have that like joy and exuberance, right? We've all been in a situation where we need to get some writing done and we don't feel particularly inspired. The good news is there's backup. The other part of your writing brain to use when you're drafting is your drafting ant. So I want you to think about ants, right? They're really efficient. And if you picture a line of ants, they're just like charging forward, they're on a mission, and there's like, they only move one way and they get stuff done, right? Ants get stuff done. Now, both your inner 5-year-old and your drafting ant will help you draft your best. So if you're like, okay, I'm gonna turn those on, I'm gonna, if I can get in that inspiration, I'm gonna like, just go for it and use it. Or if I don't feel particularly inspired, I'm just gonna be like effective and efficient, follow my outline, just be like one thing after next, keep moving forward. And now let's look at why those two will, if you use them, help you avoid that, like the editing part, okay? Your 5-year-old doesn't care about editing because she doesn't care about the judgment that might come from the outside. Your inner 5-year-old is not like, oh, I don't know, is that how I use a semicolon? Your inner 5-year-old is not like, oh no, that's not the right word there. Your inner 5-year-old is playing, okay? So if you keep your inner 5-year-old turned on, then you're not even having those thoughts like, oh, maybe I should go back and change this and make it better. You're in the zone, you're in the flow, and you're moving forward. So that's awesome when it feels that way. But again, we can't always call on that, right? Your inner 5-year-old is also pretty stubborn. And if you try to force her to come out and play and do what you want, she might be like, no, I won't, I'm grumpy, okay? But you can always call on your inner ant. And the reason your inner ant is going to keep you from going back and editing is because ants only move forward, right? Like a line of ants, they're just moving in the direction. They might be going slowly, but they're getting the job done, not looking back. What happens if you're using your inner 5-year-old or your drafting ant and you stop to edit? Okay, I'm just reading some comments. Anne says, the outline definitely helped keep me on track. Yeah, because then your ant just knows, I have to go from one thing to the next. You're not sitting there waiting for inspiration, right? You can always bust out your ant to work with your outline and go, this part, then this part, then this part. Carrie, who writes romance, is saying, my inner 5-year-old is having fun writing a dirty part of the story because it knows it shouldn't be thinking about those things. Yeah, but isn't that so fun to write from that place of inspiration? Okay, so what happens if you interrupt your inner 5-year-old or your drafting ant and start to go back and reread or edit? I'm interested in knowing your experience. If you feel like you're using these two strategies, one, like I'm writing from inspiration and flow, or two, I'm just moving step by step through that outline like Anne was talking about, what happens for you when you stop and edit? What does it feel like? I'll tell you what I observe happening for myself and for other writers when they interrupt their inner 5-year-old and they're drafting it. First is when you interrupt your inner 5-year-old and start judging her with your rational adult brain, who is very useful for editing and revising later on. But when you're in the midst of drafting, your rational adult starts picking on what your 5-year-old is doing. Your 5-year-old just starts disengaging, right? Think of this in real life with an adult standing over a child going, oh, don't do that. Oh, you're going to get dirty. Oh, you're good. Eventually, this kid just gets fed up and is like, there's nothing I can do, right? Everything I try to do, you find fault with. So just not going to try, right? If you interrupt your drafting ant, it's like putting the stick down in front of a line of ants and they get totally confused and they can't find the place they were trying to go. You get out of, what's the word I want? You get lost, right? You're like working along, following your outline. When you stop yourself and go back and edit, you get lost. You don't know where you're trying to get next, okay? So stopping to edit, you can see, is really throwing, it's throwing you into chaos, either because it is disrupting the most creative part of you that thrives on lack of judgment, or because it's disrupting the part of you who is good at just moving one step at a time toward a goal, right? So can you guys see that either way, stopping to edit is really cramping your drafting style? Let me know in the comments if that's resonating with you. Hello, Sapphire. Ooh, ended up changing characters. Cool. Okay, Carrie says, yeah, I have to keep to my outline or I mess it up. Yeah, Dave, good. I'm glad these descriptions are resonating with you. There are lots of people in my brain, and I'm like, maybe other people don't have these people in their brain. Lori says, if all else fails, throw in a ghost. There you go. Yeah, there are definitely strategies for, inspiring yourself, right? And drawing out your inner 5-year-old. So yeah, if you have some strategies that get you back into that inspiration zone, I love it. So that's why stopping to edit is such a problem. It's not just that it's slowing you down or making you unable to get all the way through a chapter or, your draft. It's actually wreaking havoc with the parts of your writing brain that are really your best friends when it comes to drafting. So what I want to encourage you to do when you draft is to have in mind that the worst thing you could do is wake up your rational adult brain. Because once that part of your brain is awake, of course you're going to want to fix things that sound awkward. Of course you're going to look back and want to research and go, wait, is that really how that works? Oh, Google, help me out, right? And you'll go down a rabbit hole. So the best thing you can do is avoid waking up a full adult. Just don't let that part of your brain come into play. Now, what's the number one thing that's going to wake up your rational adult? I'm curious. Do you guys have guesses? What do you think is the number one thing that will put that rational adult on high alert and make her want to take over? Curious if you have any thoughts or what it is for you. I'll tell you what it is for me. The number one thing that makes my rational adult wake up and take over and, send my 5-year-old off in a huff crying and send my aunt into chaos is rereading while I'm drafting. You guys feeling me on that? Give me an emoji, let me know. Does that wake up your rational adult brain? For me, it's the number one thing, right? How could it not? If I read back through, of course, I'm going to notice the things that sound awkward, or of course, I'm going to start questioning, is that really how it works? Okay, so if you want to go strong with your 5-year-old and your drafting aunt and keep drafting and stop constantly editing, then you need to stop rereading. So, stopping and going back for any reason. It'll all get confused. All right, so moving forward, using the right part of your writing brain, these are actually part of a larger strategy. And I recommend several rough draft rules as you're writing. I go through them in great detail in my book, Recipe for Drafting, which is coming out at the end of October, just in time for all of you who are doing NaNoWriMo. It's a real quick read, so you can check that out and then have a lot more success at drafting for National Novel Writing Month if you're doing that, or for whatever you're drafting. You can pre-order the book right now, or if you're watching this later, you can buy it at this link, but it's meganbarnhard.com/recipe for drafting, and I'll put that link in the comments. But if this is speaking to you, if you're like, oh yeah, I do have these different modes, these different parts of my brain, check out the book. I go into a lot more detail talking about the strengths and the benefits of these different parts of your writing brain, and then also the other rough draft rules that I recommend you follow so that you can avoid waking up the rational part of your brain who wants to be in control, but who's totally useless to you while you are drafting. She's super, super helpful when you're revising and editing, and she's nothing but trouble when you're drafting. So put her in a dark room, let her sleep while you draft, and let your 5-year-old and your aunt come out to play. All right, I'm gonna just check through and see if there are more questions or comments. Dave says, that poor first draft gets very little editing. Well, I mean, the first draft is gonna get plenty of editing, but once it is a complete draft, as opposed to once it's in the stages. Carrie says, I'm not good at multitasking anything. I have to stop and wait till I can call out my inner 5-year-old again, and that might take a couple days because she's grounded for writing dirty things. Carrie, you crack me up. You're hilarious. And as I said, you can't necessarily have your inner 5-year-old on demand, because that, again, is the part of you that's inspired and is in that joyful state. But your drafting aunt is always on call, and your drafting aunt can help you sit down and just write the very next section that you need to write. And you can always call in it. So I'm bad at multitasking too. I'm slow to transition. And I think a lot of us are and may not realize it, that we lose a lot of time switching from one mental task to another. And, you know, I was giving the analogy or the simile of picking up a different tool, but multiply that time and that transition by, 10 or 20, and then you'll get what it's like to switch tasks mentally. Lori says, the research rabbit hole gets me every time. Yeah, and research is important, but trying to research while you're drafting isn't effective. I'm hearing people say grammar, rereading. Yep, these are the things that wake up your rational brain. Carrie says, I can only reread the last paragraph I wrote. Yeah. Anne says, same here. Okay, awesome. Wayne is trying to finish a chapter so he can send it out to people. Awesome. So that's a great motivation, Wayne. Get it done so you can send it to your readers. Carrie's going to draw a drafting ant to make it look like a fire ant. I love it. All right, awesome. It's as simple as it sounds, and it's as difficult as it sounds, folks. You want to just use the right part of your writing brain. That's for everybody, that's reliably your aunt. When you're lucky and she's awake and amenable, it's your inner 5-year-old. But whichever part you use, it's not your rational adult. So put her to sleep. I mean, make her go to sleep, not put her to sleep, and use the other parts. Okay, if you want to read more about the parts of your writing brain, again, you can do that in Recipe for Drafting. I'll put the link. And thanks so much for joining me. If you found this video helpful, please do like it, share it with another writing buddy, and I will catch you all next time. And I'll leave you with this image. Lori says, my inner editor is tied up and hanging out in the attic. Awesome. That's the best place for her. All right. Until next time, y'all. Happy writing. Bye.